Good day, students. Welcome to our virtual class on economics. So today we will have to discuss about the chapter 4, which is the demand and supply part 2. Since your last two handouts is about the demand and supply, but it highlights the demand side. So last time we had the demand side, that is the buyer side of the economy, and how buyer takes his decision based on what factors. So that was the content of your handouts. If there is an increase in price, what would he do as a consumer? So the demand side was all about the consumer side. So if there are changes in any other non-price factors and how does affect the demand. So now we are going to talk about the supply side. So supply side meaning the demand side is all about the buyer side, right? The consumer. We talk about the consumer. So on the supply side, we will talk about the seller or the producers of the goods. So now we will talk about the supply, just like the demand side. On the supply side, the quantity of supply from the seller's perspective. Okay, so we have there a supply. So this diagram here, so supply means the seller or the producers of the goods. We have the products to sell or the products to sell. It's not just the person or the seller, but also supply means the products to sell. In health economics, we have the supply as we talk about supply, or the definition of the supply in health economics is about the medicines or the health service that is given by the doctors. Okay, so the doctors are the suppliers of this one. So we have here a diagram or an equation which shows the relationship of the QS here, this one, the QS. QS means the quantity supply is equal to this price owned and another non-price factor. So here in this discussion, we will have to know the relationship between the quantity supply and the price owned, or the supply that is owned by the seller and that will be produced by the seller. The quantity supply, its quantity or yung bilang, and the relationship, ano yung magiging resulta if this quantity decreases or increases. At the same time, its relationship on its price. So here now, when we talk about the relationship of the quantity of supply and its price owned, we will have to talk about the law of supply. So the relationship of the quantity supply and the price owned is what we call the law of supply. So here in this discussion, we will discuss what will be its relationship if the quantity supply will increase and the price, what will happen to its price owned, no? So now we will talk about the law of supply. So we have here law of supply states that if the own price increases, the quantity supply increases. So when the own price decreases, the quantity supply decreases also. So what does that mean? So we have here a diagram. Kung tumataas daw yung presyo ng goods na nasa supplier, and then also the quantity supply must also increase. So we have a direct relationship of the price owned and the quantity supply. So if kung yung price is increasing, kailangan din price owned is increasing in the market, and then we have dapat sa perspective ng ating supply side or the supplier side, we must increase also the quantity supply if the price owned is increasing. While when the price owned is decreasing, it will be also, the quantity supply also be decreasing. So there is a direct relationship. So there will be no inverse relationship with that. So if the one increases, the one factor also increases. So always remember that its relationship with the price owned and quantity supply will be direct, have a direct relationship. That is what we call ceteris paribus. So ceteris paribus means the non-price factor here, we have here, no? If this quantity supply and this price own has the relationship, the direct relationship, meaning sila lang yung hindi kasali si non-price factor. Si non-price factor there is a constant factor. So this one is non-changing. If this one increase, this will increase also, and this factor here could not be increasing. It won't increase. For example, yung isang medicine, if dumadami siya, the quantity supply is increasing, then also the price will also increase. I mean the price increase must also have a quantity supply na nag-i-increase. But the non-price factors like the availability, the technology is constant. So we will talk about the non-price factor later on the next slide. We have here the supply curve. So what is the use of this supply curve? So we have here the y-axis, which is the price, the vertical line, and the horizontal line here we have the x-axis, which is the quantity. So this one here, this line, the blue line, the slope, that is what we call the supply curve. No? If this one, for example, the price one, we have the price one increases, and we have also here the quantity one, for example. And then, if this one increases, no, the price increases, the quantity also increases, right? And when it decreases, here, we have an arrow downwards, the price decreases, then also the quantity decreases. So that is the relationship of the price owned and the quantity supply, shown by the supply curve. So this supply curve, the use of supply curve is to show the relationship of the price owned and the quantity supply. So we have here a slope, which is the supply that is shown as the supply, and here is the price and the quantity. So now, what if this one shows a constant in the non-price factor? But how about if there will be a shift in this supply curve? For example, hindi lang siya pataas, magiging pa ganito or pa straight. What will be the indication with that? So that will be our that will be discussed later. So we have here the 4 non-price factors. So we talked about earlier the non-price factors, which is unchanging, hindi daw siya nag-iiba kung ito ay tumataas or bumababa, these two. But what if this one is not constant, or this one will change? No? That will result into a shift in supply. In this curve, magiging pababa or straight yung curve ng ating supply curve if the non-price factor here, the non-price factor will be changing or will change. No? So we have here an abbreviation of the non-price factors. We have the T, which is the technology. What will happen if the technology will be better on producing the supply of the goods, right? And the input Or what will happen if this input or ingredients or the raw materials of this supply, of this product will be not available or maliit lang siya sa market or walang raw materials na mahahanap or konti lang na raw materials ang mahahanap sa paggawa ng isang medisina, for example. And the third one, we have the expectation of the supplier. We will talk about that later. The expectation of the supplier on what will he or she will do to the price of the supply kung today and on the future. Okay, so the S is the seller in the market. This one will talk about the number of the sellers of the market. What will happen if the sellers on the market will decrease and increase? Is the quality supply and the price own will be affected by it? No. So we will talk about it later. So if these four factors, the non-price factors will change into somehow, kung mag-change siya, itong mga factors na ito, may magbabago ba doon sa price and the quantity supply ng supplier or the supply in the market. So we have here, if we consider a change of any of these factor, kung mag-consider tayo ng change in that factor, assuming that the own price of the good is constant, kung constant yung own price, kung hindi nag-change, for example, kung piso lang yung pagbili ng raw materials to produce a medicine, for example, kung hindi mag-change, kung for example 1 peso lang, ano kaya ang mangyayari sa ating if we consider the dynamic change in any of these factors? So kung mag-change ba ng mga factors na ito ang price noong ating raw materials. Okay, so let us now go to these four factors. We first go to this one, the technology. Okay, so first this is the shift in supply curve. Kung mag-change, if the non-price factor will not be constant na, there will be a shift. So yung sinabi ko kanina. So if one of these factors is not constant or change in the market, there will be a shift in the supply curve. First, we go to these four factors. We have to go to the technology. So what happens if the technology of producing the goods is better? For example, if you have to produce this kind of medicine and if the technology is much better than any other pharmaceutical companies that will produce this kind of medicine, what will happen to your company if you have the better technology to produce these goods, no? And what will happen to the supply of your medicine, for example? So is it a good factor on the supply curve having a good technology in producing the goods? So that's the question there. And why? So we have first the technology. Excuse me. So if this one, the technology is better, what will the seller do, for example, no? So the seller, if we have a good technology, or the company, for example, a pharmaceutical company have the good technology, there will be the indication of this one, there will be a fast production of the supply if the technology is better. Yun yung sinasabi dito. So if you have that good technology, you can produce thoroughly, or you can produce fast the supply that you wanted to give to the market, right? If you have that better technology, or you have that advanced technology, right? So you can compete with the supply market. So if you have that better technology, you can produce fast and you can have more supply, and pwedeng makabenta ka ng marami. Right? For example, sa on this pandemic, the producing of masks and face shield, mga ganun, if you have an advanced technology, ikaw yung mauunang makaproduce those things. And, excuse me, and you will be the one who can sell more in the market, no? Kasi ano siya ngayon parang mabenta ang mask and face shield, pero wala na yata yung face shield today. So after that, if the production is fast, so the goods will be cheaper for the seller and produce more products. So isang factor then, if you have that good technology, if you have that advanced technology on producing your supply or your what we call that, your product, you will produce more and you will sell that in a cheaper price, right? So if you have that cheaper price and you produce more, what will happen? So you will sell more, right? So we have here the third factor, we spend less on production spend less on the production and while you produces more, and also you sell more. So meaning, if you have that good technology, you have that advanced technology on making your raw materials, you spend less, no? Kasi hindi ka na magsasayang ng tawag doon? Sweldo sa mga that is what companies are doing. They wanted to advance their technology to minimize the what we call that, manpower or the human resource para makasave sila sa sweldohan ng kanilang mga employees. So if we have spent less on the production, so we produces more, no? And if we produces more, we sell more. And if we sell more, the supply will go up. So we have there. So the improvement in technology will lead to an increase in supply. That's what I told you earlier. And any disimprovement or any less in technology will lead to the decrease in supply. So if you have that low technology or you have that low standard of technology of producing the goods, so there will be a decrease in supply. So there will be, if the supply increases or there will be an increase in supply, there will be a right shift, no? Right shift, so pataas ang ating supply curve. But if there will be a decrease in supply, there will be a left shift, pa-left, yung shift ng ating supply curve. Yung arrow ng ating supply curve is pababa or left shift. So the second non-price factor, we have the inputs or the ingredients of the goods. So we have first the price. If the price factor of the inputs, or yung inputs meaning is the ingredients of the goods. For example, making soda or beverages, diba? Sugar. That is the ingredients or the raw materials of the supply. If we consider the price and the availability of these raw materials, what will happen to our supply curve, no? So we have here the price of the inputs of the raw materials and the availability. So if the price we have here, if the input price, note, the input or the ingredients is also something that goes into production. So that is the raw materials that will be used to produce the goods. just like a technology. So it's a resource. So we have here, if the input price becomes expensive, so the cost of the production goes up. So what will happen if the price input will go up? It will increase. No. So now we go to the input's price, right? So if the input price becomes expensive or the raw materials of the supply is expensive, or it will become, for example, kahit yung raw materials pag nagagamitin sa isang medicine to produce a medicine becomes expensive, meaning the cost of the production will go up. So if you have an expensive raw materials, we have here if the price input of the if the price inputs or the price increases, the raw materials increases, the supply will decrease. So if mamahalin yung paggawa ng isang gamot, so meaning scarce yung supply niya, magiging maliit or decreasing yung supply niya. And if the price input is decreasing, we have also an increase of supply. If mumurahin lang yung raw materials ng paggawa ng ating supply, or for example in the health economics, the medicine, then the supply of that medicine will also increase. So the next one, we have the second factor of the inputs. So the first one we have the price, and the second one we have the availability of the inputs. If the raw materials is available, what will happen? Or if that input of the raw materials or the ingredients that we're going to use to produce the goods, if marami siya or it's very available or more available, if inputs are more available, then it will be cheaper. So magiging, kung mataas ang supply ng ating availability ng ating raw materials, and then the goods will be cheaper kasi makaka-produce tayo ng marami. No? And if the inputs are scarce or konti lang ang nahahanap na raw materials in making that goods or that medicine, for example, and then that medicine will be expensive. No? So, nagmamatter pala yung non-price factors doon sa ating price own. Kung mag-matter yung price own, then magmamatter din siya doon sa ating quantity supply. So, there will be a relationship in these three. The quantity supply, the price own meaning yung kung magkano ibenta ng supplier ang kanyang goods, and then the non-factors are the for abbreviation, we have the ties, the technology inputs, and the third one, we go to the expectation of the supplier. So we have here the expectation of the supplier. The expectation of the supplier is about the future of the own price, or kung magkano, yung future, ito yung expectation ng supplier kung magkano niya ibebenta in the future ang kanyang goods, no? And what happens to the supply today. So if the seller So if the seller expect the own price to be higher in the future, no? Kung gusto ng supplier or the seller, gusto niyang maging mahal ang own price, ang pagbenta niya ng kanyang supply in the future, kasi alam naman niyang demand ito sa market, then stock muna niya ito. Kung gusto niya yun, no? Ipa-increase, then the supply today will be decreasing. So if the seller expected to increase the price own, increase, right? And then the supply today will decrease. Okay? So if the seller expect to sell less or konti na lang yung ibebenta niya in the future, then the supply today will increase. no? Magbibigay siya ng maraming supply or magbebenta siya ng marami today because that supplier expect to decrease the price, the own price of the goods in the future. So, alam niya, the expectation of the supplier, nag-expect siya na magdi-decrease yung presyo ng goods na yun or ng binibenta. So, today, tataasan niya or dadamihan niya ang kanyang ibibenta today while it is in that price pa, no? So, what was that again? If the expectation of the supplier in the future, the own price na mag-increase, so magbebenta siya ng konti lang today. Okay? So, if the expectation of the supplier of the own price, the price of the goods will decrease tomorrow or in the future, then he will sell more supply today. Okay? So that is the relationship of the own price in the expectation of or the non-price factor of the quantity supply. So we have here the fourth one, the number of the sellers. So this one also affects the supply, the quantity supply and the price of the goods in the market. For example, if there are many numbers of seller na nagbebenta sa isang produkto na iyon, so meaning the price will go down if the sellers are many. And then if the price will go down, the quantity supply also, kung maraming nagbebenta doon, meaning the quantity supply increases. Because there are many sellers that will sell that goods, no? So if the number of sellers will decrease, then the number of supply also decreases. And then the price owned of that supply will increase. Okay? So that is the relationship of the four factors of the nine price factors of the quantity supply. So that ends my presentation today. Tomorrow I will send you another one. We will talk about the equilibrium of the supply and demand in the market. So stay tuned, class. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. That's all for today.